Welcome and thanks for joining us. Today's discussion is with Radiant Logic's Dieter Schuler, Vice President of Sales and Business Development. They are well known for providing a federated identity service based on virtualization. Dieter, please give us a thumbnail sketch of the identity problem that federal agencies face.
Well, so before we talk about federal agencies specifically, let's look at the bigger picture. This problem is prevalent not only with federal agencies, but also in the commercial sector. You look at every new application that comes in the door, there's a number of things that have to happen. The application has to authenticate its users. It has to understand enough about the user to make appropriate access decisions. The further out you go in terms of SaaS or cloud, the less you're able to customize these applications. Yet, the applications have to figure out where to go to get all this information. And if you're like most organizations, that information is scattered across many different systems. So you look at employees, it's not just Active Directory, but a number of different forests, a number of different domains. There's usually some sort of a legacy Sun or Oracle directory that exists, and then there's a number of legacy systems like RACF or ACF2 or Top Secret or other databases or directories that make up what I would call the existing identity infrastructure. In a perfect world, you would scrap all of that and you would build something that was going to meet the needs of all your future initiatives. The problem with that is you scrap any of this or you change any of this and you have mission critical stuff that's dependent on it that breaks. So the dilemma is, how do you feed all of these new initiatives and yet preserve and honor the legacy that exists? The only way that you're going to get from where you are to where you want to be is to put in an abstraction layer, to put in a federated identity service based on virtualization that can meet the needs of all these new initiatives by leveraging what already exists and taking advantage of those investments. Now, a lot of people think that they're going to solve this problem with federation and providing federated access to applications, right? What they don't realize until they start to get into it is that's only half the problem. That provides single sign-on and seamless integration across the applications, but it still doesn't address the fact that you've got user populations and profile information scattered all over the place. If you look at the federal government specifically, there's a number of mandates or initiatives that most of these agencies are facing. It starts at a high level with the need to collaborate across agencies or even within an agency, and the need for more effective information sharing. From a security perspective, there's a mandate for PIV or CAC or some other form of what I would call strong certificate-based authentication that goes beyond just passwords, right? In addition, fine-grained access is becoming a priority because one of the things that these agencies have started to realize is it's not enough anymore to provide a role and put everyone in that role, because it just doesn't work from an authorization perspective. You give people access to too much, or you end up having too many roles. So the term that everyone is starting to focus on now is attribute-based access control. And you add the move to the cloud and the fact that you're going to have to sync data even more. And before you start opening up different holes in your firewall, you have to rationalize that data on-prem, and you start to see where the problem starts to become very acute.
Yeah, and in fact, one theme is more users, more apps, more devices, and all of a sudden, let's say today you wake up in the morning, 9 o'clock, you're federal agency and everyone's happy, everything's fine, and it could change by the end of the day. So you have to have some kind of a dynamic capability within this authorization process.
Absolutely, and it used to be pretty simple because you had employees accessing on-premise devices and on-premise applications. Well, now
the good old days.
Those are the good old days, right? And now the requirement is it's not just employees, but in the commercial space, it's partners, vendors, customers. In the federal space, it's constituents from different agencies or even citizens. It's not just on-premise apps, but hybrid apps, cloud apps, SaaS apps, and it's not just devices that are issued by the organization, but all kinds of apps or devices that include BYOD. Right, so the further out you go on each of these axes, the less control you have and the harder it is to manage security. And what most people have figured out is the perimeter is gone. And if you're not paying attention to identity, you don't have security. So the focus now is, how do I build an identity dial tone or an identity service that's going to provide me with a way to just make a request and get what I need versus having to do customization for every new initiative that I have that's going to figure out where to go to get this stuff.
And it's a matter of cost. This customization for each new person is very, very costly in the administrative world. There's got to be a system that can be designed that'll reduce that cost. And if people are complaining about cost overruns, this is one phase here that people don't even talk about, do they?
Absolutely. Right. If you look at the cost of each project to integrate that project into the existing identity infrastructure, it's fairly significant, not only in terms of money, but also time to delivery. If you can reduce that and make it predictable for every one of your new initiatives, and if you can do the heavy lifting once and do it right and make it reusable versus doing it every time, you can reduce your costs significantly. Cost is one aspect, right? The other aspect is becoming an enabler versus becoming a bottleneck. If you look at many of these agencies and the people that are responsible for security or identity, a lot of times the projects that come look at the people in the security world as a bottleneck. What if you could turn that team into an enabler, right? What if that team could help get this done faster versus telling you that you can't do it?
Oh, but that's the team that slows us down.
The team that slows you
versus,
down, exactly.
oh, that's who is that team anyway? Because it's operating so smoothly.
Yes.
Just real quickly here, can you give us some of the federal mandates that provide for stronger authentication?
So let's talk about PIV and CAC. And there's some talk that down the road it might be other certificate-based strong authentication. We did a pilot at the Department of Homeland Security, for example, where they had a number of legacy applications that couldn't integrate into a single sign-on or web access management or federation layer. They were just doing authentications against a directory. So the mandate is take these applications and have them support a PIV card. How do I do that without going and changing each application? What we were able to do was put in an abstraction layer that allowed, from the back-end perspective, the detection of the presence of a PIV card without having to change the applications. And so there's tremendous value in the hundreds of applications that exist that can't be PIV enabled or CAC enabled that now work in this environment.
Very good. We're going to pause here for a short break. My guest today is Dieter Schuler, Vice President of Business Development, Radiant Logic. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy, on the discussion, Securely Managing Access and Identity in Government, sponsored by Radiant Logic on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.